So Pervez Amrali Hoodbhoy is a distinguished professor of physics and mathematics at Forman Christian College, University in Lahore. He taught for 45 years at Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad. Dr. Hoodbhoy graduated from MIT with an undergraduate degrees in electrical engineering and mathematics in 1973, a master's in solid state physics in 1973, and a PhD degree in nuclear physics in 1978. In 1968, he won the Baker Award for Electronics, and in 1984, the Abdus Salam Prize for Mathematics. In 2003, he was awarded UNESCO's Kalinga Prize for the popularization of science. In 2010, Dr. Hoodbhoy received the Joseph A. Burden Award from the American Physical Society and the Jean Mayer Award from Tufts University. In 2011, he was included in the list of the 100 most influential global thinkers by Foreign Policy magazine. In 2013, he was made a member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament Affairs from 2013 to 2017. In 2019, he received the Honorary Doctor of Law degree from the University of British Columbia. So I would now like to welcome Professor Hoodbhoy to take the stage. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Thank you, Professor Fayaz Mehman and the University of Sustainable Sciences. So it's a pretty grim topic that I have before me: sustainable development and climate change. You know, climate change is perhaps the most important issue of our times. But maybe I'll start with a little story. It's a story of two frogs. They were loitering near the kitchen stove, and one of them fell into a pot of very hot water, nearly boiling water. And as soon as he fell in, he jumped out because it was just unbearable. He was saved. The other frog fell into another pot of water on the same stove, but it was just warm. And he stayed there thinking it couldn't get worse, but then it got hotter and hotter, and soon he was unable to jump out, and so he died. Okay, the moral of the story is that one can survive sudden shocks, but those shocks that come over a long period of time don't trigger our defensive mechanism in the same way that something instant does. And this is what climate change is. It has taken us a very long time. I mean, long on the scale of maybe 50 years to realize that this is something which is actually planet-threatening. Something that is going to change the lives of our children. Well, it'll even change our lives. Those of us who have crossed 50, we're going to see in our lifetimes significant effects of that. But what our children will see and what our children's children will see will be an entirely different planet. So let's go to the year 2050. We could go to another year, but this is half through the century. And you're looking at planet Earth from a satellite, and you see there's no ice at the poles. It's all melted. You will see some cities which are gone, and in fact, even countries that are gone, like the Maldives. The Maldives won't exist by that time. They'll have been completely swamped by the rising sea level. You'll see the spread of deserts, and the forests will have mostly been wiped out. So if we are to continue the way that we've been living, then it'll be a very, very different planet. Well, who's to blame? Now, whenever there's something terrible that happens, you look for somebody to blame. And who is there to blame over here? I mean, it would be so nice if we could blame someone and say, that person, that country is responsible for it. It's not so easy because you see, the problem is that you and I are equal accomplices in this. We all drive cars. We all travel in airplanes. We all use electricity in fairly large amounts. We take advantage of heating, of air conditioning. We, simply by the fact that we exist, we are actually extracting resources from the earth. We are using energy. And so this is the reason that it's not so easy to say who is to be blamed for climate change. However,
Sir Parvez Saab, sorry to interrupt you. Are you sharing your screen for the slides or they are yet to come? Sorry,
they're yet to come. They're yet to come. I'll slowly get to them.
Okay.
There's no rush.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. So the fact is that we all are to blame for that. Now, let's see how it actually started. And so here I will need to share my screen, which then, let me see. Let's see how that comes about. So, okay, so am I sharing my screen with you presently?
And not yet,
Not yet?
Parvez.
So let me see if I can persuade my screen to be shared with you. Yeah. All right, can you see this now?
Yes, now you can
Okay.
see that. Thank you.
So this is a graph of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and emissions of carbon dioxide from the year 1750 till last year. 1750 because this is the start of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution it started in Britain, of course, and it was basically the discovery that in factories you could use steam power and coal power to produce things en masse. Instead of having them hand produced, you could produce them in factories, employ a lot of people. But for that, you needed energy. And when you burn coal, then that was the primary source of energy at that time. Well, then you started to contribute towards atmospheric carbon dioxide. So if you look over here, I think you can see my pointer. In 1750, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there were 260 parts per million of carbon dioxide. And nothing much changed because in the initial years, it was water power. And it's only after the discovery of coal that the amount of CO2 started rising, and you see that it's rising. And today it's something like between it's about 370 parts per million. And if this continues up till 2050, then this graph will predict, you can extrapolate it to something like 700 parts per million, which will be absolutely catastrophic. The other graph over here is that of the number of tons of, billions of tons of carbon dioxide, and you can see that that also follows this. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is the greenhouse effect. When light from the sun, well, light is also heat. When it strikes the earth, a part of it is reflected back into space. A part of it tries to get back into space, But then because there's a layer of carbon dioxide around it, some of that gets reflected and reflected and reflected, and so it becomes trapped in the Earth's atmosphere. And this is what keeps the Earth warm, which is fine. That's good. Now, I'll take back my screen so that you can, well, maybe I'll show one more. Yeah, so this is the normal mechanism. The problem is that when there's too much carbon dioxide, then too much heat becomes trapped. And this is what is dangerous, because this is what leads to global warming. Now, it's not something that was immediately obvious, but about 50 years ago, scientists started to think about what would be the impact of this. And soon it became pretty obvious that what is called anthropogenic climate change is going to be is going to lead to a new age for the Earth, something that will be devastating. Now, here is the present situation. So it's we are here at about 370 parts per million. This dashed line over here that you see, that is the pre-industrial era level of carbon dioxide. If we continue at the present rate, then we'll have this red curve. So that's this model over here, this model of climate change, RCP 8.5. And then under different assumptions, you can have this, or you can have this, or you can have this. Now, RCP 2.6, this is absolutely the most, you could say, the best thing that you could wish for. But even so, you're not going to get to the dashed line over here. And that says that the Earth is in for a big, big change. Now, let me now get out of this. Let's see how to get out of this. I want to stop sharing my screen. How do I stop sharing my screen? Are you still seeing my screen, or are you seeing me?
Yeah.
So,
Sir,
yeah,
at the top, you may see the red button which says stop sharing.
Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you. That did it. That did it. Okay, so those were some general facts. But you have to ask, you have to come back to this question. Why has the Earth gotten itself into such terrible trouble? I said, yeah, sure, we're all guilty in a sense, because we're all consumers of energy. We all produce carbon dioxide. And by the way, it's not just carbon dioxide, there's also methane, which is produced by cows principally. And methane is 200 times more effective than carbon dioxide in producing global warming. However, the amount of methane in the atmosphere is much less, and so it contributes to a much lesser amount than carbon dioxide does. But now let's come back to the question, what are the drivers for producing these vast amounts of carbon dioxide? And here it is greed. It is human greed to want more and more and more. And greed in the form of the capitalist system is really what is responsible for the state of our planet today. And unless this greed is curbed, it's going to be very, very difficult for humans to survive. Now, how does the capitalist system work? Basically, it relies upon the production of surplus. The whole goal of capitalism is to make profits. You make profits by investing back part of your surplus, and you generate economic activity. Well, of course, that economic activity generates jobs, which is good, but the whole goal is to maximize production. And so what the capitalist system wants is high growth. Now, you see, every economist in the world today, except maybe Cuba, take a couple of countries like that, every economist says that our holy grail is to maximize the rate of growth. So if it's 2%, it's not good. If it's 4%, it is better. If it is 7%, it is excellent. And of course, China was having growth rates of something like 9%. So China grew and grew and grew. But then as it grew and grew and grew, it also started to consume more and more and more, which meant that from there, carbon dioxide emissions and other pollutants started increasing their amounts. And China became, at one point, the most polluted country in the world. Earlier on, it was Britain, it was parts of Europe which were the most polluted, then it was China, and India is also extremely polluted. In fact, so bad is the pollution in Delhi that you've all heard about that. I need not amplify on that. But even in Lahore, you can see that the pollution from the cars is so very bad that sometimes you can't see to the end of the street. That happens in the winters. So the point is that although earlier the holy grail was maximizing economic growth, this is something that is not sustainable. Sustainability requires that you, the well-being of people, you do not make holy maximum growth. Well, let's look at it this way also. Suppose something grows at the rate of 3%. 3% per annum means that in 25 years, I'm not sure whether it's 25 or 22, but somewhere in between 22 and 25, you have a doubling. And then you have a doubling after another 25 years, and so on and so forth. Now, if you double, this is something which is in the limit of exponential growth. And an exponential growth then leads you to infinity, which means that you will have produced so much. And in the process, you will have, point is that whenever you have a fixed rate of growth, 3%, 4%, whatever, that leads to exponential growth. And exponentials, for anyone who studied mathematics, the limit of that is infinity, which means that you put upon the earth a burden that it simply cannot sustain. And therefore, sustainable development means that you plateau. You stop growing after a certain point. And so therefore, the goal of sustainable development is to have zero economic growth. Now that sounds very bad from today's point of view, but that is indeed what has to be done. Okay, now let me be more specific to Pakistan, since I see that most of the participants here, I'm looking at the list over here, seem to be from Pakistan, or they could be from India, I don't know. But well, let's take Pakistan. It has a very small contribution, something like 0.8% to the growth of greenhouse gases. And yet it is a country that's going to be very strongly affected by global warming. Now, the recent studies show that the glaciers in the Himalayas are going to be melting at an ever faster rate. We've seen evidence of that. We've seen that there have been floods. I think the 2010 floods, they put something like 25% of Pakistan underwater. Before that, there was very little rain. So this is going to lead to drought as well as floods. And most significantly, it is going to lead to areas of Pakistan where the temperatures will be so high that it will be impossible for people to live over there. So something like places like Sibbi or Jacobabad, they are among the hottest places on earth, where the temperature is beyond 50 degrees in the recent past, but it's going to get worse from there. It's going to get worse. And so probably there will be parts of Pakistan, and they will be the deserts, which will become impossible to live. There's now absolutely nothing you can do about that, because climate scientists have said, they have they've given some fairly convincing evidence that we have crossed the tipping point. The tipping point means that you have exceeded a level that even if you stop now, you're not going to get lower in terms of temperatures. So this is very bad news. There's nothing that you can do now, nothing that humans can do now, which will stop the melting of ice at the North and the South poles. And so the real question is, what is it that can be done? Okay, so obviously, you're not going to be able to prevent climate change no matter what you do now. So what is the way of least pain out? In other words, what could be possible mitigation strategies? Well, first of all, I think you have to realize that things that were considered luxuries in earlier times, like air conditioning or clean air or clean water, are not going to be luxuries in the future. You will, in those very, very hot days, there's no way for you to even survive without air conditioning. And air conditioning means that you've got to spend energy on it. So energy is going to be absolutely crucial. Similarly for water. Water, yes, there'll be water, but it'll be dirty water. You will have to purify that water. To purify that water, by whatever means, you will need energy. And similarly, well, in air, of course, you can't purify on a very large scale, but in cities it's being tried. And again, that's very energy intensive. So the real issue is, how do you then generate energies on a scale where you do not contribute significantly to global warming, and where you can then attack some of these problems? So I'm going to now show you some hope in that regard. So I need my screen back. I'm going to ask you to look at this. These are the possible ways by which we can generate energy. There's, of course, diesel, coal, and these are highly polluting. They add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. As it is, there's a limited amount of hydrocarbons and coal that there is in the ground, but even that is a very large amount and enough to destroy the world quite completely. Hydro is certainly a possibility, but making dams has, as we all know, disadvantages. They stop the flow of water downstream. Liquefied natural gas is better than diesel or coal, but then again, it's a hydrocarbon fuel and it adds to global warming. The real hope lies in solar and in wind. Now, solar is, this is not just domestic solar. It's not just the solar panels that you can put on your roof, it's also concentrated solar. It is also solar which has inbuilt storage, so that, for example, if you melt sodium chloride or some other salt, then that salt, when it is heated to 1000 degrees centigrade, it stores a lot of heat in it, and then you can use that to drive turbines. But even cheaper than solar is wind. Wind is, of course, not there in all parts of the world, but certainly in Pakistan, in the coastal areas, there is a lot. And if you go from Karachi to Hyderabad, you will see a lot of windmills over there. And in that area near Keti Bandar, you can see thousands of windmills which have already been installed. But we're only using a very, very small fraction of that. So in my opinion, solar and wind are the ways to go. Now, this is of course very good that we are able to generate electricity without much pollution, but this is still not everything. Look, the most important thing that Pakistan is confronted with, and which everybody in government refuses to face, that is population control. We don't even have a Ministry of Population Planning. There used to be one, but under pressure from the mullahs, it was given a different name, and it has essentially stopped to function. Pakistan has the highest population growth rate in South Asia, with the exception of Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, more children are born, but they don't survive as long. Now, to give you a hint of the severity of this population, suppose that there was no population control, that we keep a growth rate of 3%. Now, 3% means a doubling time of 25 years. And that's roughly the rate that we've had, because when Pakistan came into existence in 1947, it had 28 million people. Now it is 220 million people. Okay, so let's see how that has worked out. It doubled, so 28, let's call it 30. 30 went to 60, 60 went to 120, 120 went to 240. This is pretty close to 220. Now, what happens if we continue for 25 years at this rate? Well, then 240 goes to 480. 480 then goes to 960. 960 then goes to 2 billion. 2 billion goes to 4 billion. 4 billion goes to 8 billion. So in roughly 150 years, at the growth rate of 3%, Pakistan will have more people in its geographical boundaries than the entire population of the world. Now, there's nothing, absolutely nothing. You can talk about all the technology in the world, you can talk about everything fancy, but if we continue to produce children at this rate, we are doomed. Why don't we talk about these things ever? They've even taken out the chapter on reproduction in biology books from Pakistani schools under pressure from the mullahs. Is there a national secret about how children are born? Well, this doesn't seem to be much of a secret, because our production rate is just fantastic. So we've got to get over this. Finally, I'll say, I think I'm pretty much at the end. It's, I said there's no going back on climate change. And it's not me who's saying it's those who study climate, the climate scientists, who are saying that it is upon us. Which means that we've got to be very, very sure about what we're going to do. And of course, we can make plans, but then we have to implement those plans. So, for example, one very good plan is reforestation. And so you've heard that 1 billion trees are going to be planted. There's going to be 1 billion tree tsunami in Pakistan. I'm very happy about that. I wish we could actually plant 1 billion trees and also look after them. I'm not sure we can do it. But fine, that's very good. On the other hand, if you open Dawn today, Dawn newspaper today, you find that Pakistan is the South Asian country, is the Asian country, I'm sorry, which has the highest rate of deforestation except for Afghanistan, because they steal the wood. Forest areas which are reserved to be natural preserves are being encroached upon by powerful people, particularly the military. And if this continues, then we will not have any forests. So we can plan all we want, but if we don't implement our plans, if we're not sincere to them, then it doesn't really make a difference whether you have plans or not. So to conclude, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, we all have different challenges that are coming from climate change. Bangladesh, for example, has the problem of rising sea levels. A good part of that country will be submerged by 2050. We will, in Pakistan, also suffer quite a bit from that. Karachi, it is predicted, will be mostly submerged by 2060. So that's just 40 years from now, something like a half of the city will be submerged. I did want to show you one remaining picture, and let me see if I can show you, if maybe I have it here. Yeah, this is the Indus Delta. You see that the river then makes this delta over here, the mangroves are out here, but you see how a population is encroaching on this. And now what is happening is that with the rising sea level, you're going to have houses that were built near the sea, something like 60, 70 years ago. You can look at that house. They are going to come under the sea very shortly. Now, this house is already unlivable over here. So, coastal areas of Pakistan are going to be affected, and even places which are far inland, like Badin, you're going to have seawater incursion over there. We can handle these problems to an extent, but we have to do population planning. We have to stop this mad growth of population. And secondly, we really have to put our money, our effort into plans that are actually good, and then implement those plans. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to questions from you.
Thank you, Prof Hoodbhoy Sahab, which is very much appreciated. Quite inspiring and thought-provoking talk. Before it becomes too late, or already it looks it is very too late. Now we have a challenge now how to manage this question and answer session. So for all participants, the guidance is that if you hover your mouse, you will see a button at the bottom of the screen on the participants. If you press on it, then if you go the other screen, you will see there is an option on raise your hand. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and then one of our team members from Canada, Ashfaq Sumro, is going to manage that process and then let you ask the questions. So now I can see the first question is from Waqas Ahmad Khan. Waqas, could you please unmute your mic and ask the question?
Hello everyone, I'm Muqasim Khan from UT Peshawar. Thank you sir for the nice presentation. Sir, my question is basically that as you explained that Pakistan is not producing that much greenhouse gases. For example, our greenhouse gases emission is less than 8%, but still we are 0.8%. But still we are among the 5 most vulnerable countries towards climate change. So if we reduce that greenhouse gases, for example, if we cut it to the half, how much it will help us to avoid future disasters, and what will be its economic consequences for us, sir? Thank you.
It will not make much difference if Pakistan cuts it 0.8% to 0.4%. That's not going to make a difference. Even if the world goes to zero now, goes to zero emissions now, you're not going to now avoid climate change. It'll be very good if you can go to zero, or you can go to substantially less amounts now. But the fact is that it's already too late. We have put the planet on a path where global warming is going to be increasing, and there are graphs which show you that by the end of this century, we would have either 2 degrees centigrade increase, or maybe 2.5 degrees centigrade. Now, we don't know exactly how governments will respond, what they will do. Let's hope that Donald Trump loses his election and America starts behaving itself. But even if America starts behaving itself, it is already too late.
Thank you, Parvez.
Yes. Now the next question is going to be from Mohammed Siddiq. I guess he's based in UK. Mr. Mohsen,
yes.
Please, over to you.
Hello. It is really pleasure to see and hear from you, Professor Hoodbhoy. And thanks for highlighting the one of the major issue of the impact of human burden on planet. So my question is, what strategy could be taken to reduce the rate of population growth? As you know and pointed out that there are some ideologies that encourage to have more children.
Well, there's a simple answer to that. Empower women. When you empower women, and the woman also has a say in how many children she will produce fewer. And so the countries that have succeeded in reducing their population growth have done that through the empowerment of women. If you look at, so earlier on, population planning experts, they used to say, oh, when a country gets richer, then automatically people will feel more secure, and so therefore they will produce less children. That's only true up to an extent. If you look at several Arab countries, even as they got richer, their population rate of growth started to increase. So ultimately, it is about the woman. The woman has to have a say. She has to be a partner with the man in deciding the number of children.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question is from Ghulam Raza Sayed. Could you please unmute your mic, Ghulam Raza? Is he there? Moving on. The next question we have from Sheikh Sanaullah. Could you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
First of all, I am very thankful to Professor Hoodbhoy for very informative session. I would like to ask that in Balochistan there is coastal areas and we have much wind. So our ministries and planning and commission should linkage with industry and academia to develop wind power energy and as well as solar power, so we can reduce our climate.
So as I understood it, the question is, how do you develop a wind industry?
Yes.
Wind is is easier to develop than solar, much easier than nuclear, and much cheaper than anything else. Now, how do you develop it? Well, basically, you need two things over there. You need the technology for windmill construction, you need the technology for windmill installation, and a distribution network. All of this is fairly low tech. It can be done with basic engineering. I don't say it requires zero engineering, but with the sort of engineering that you would get engineering students that by, let's say, NED or UET or any other Pakistani institution, you can actually produce these windmills. And of course, there's a lot to be learned in terms of the design of rotors, in terms of stability against windstorms, etc. All of this has to be learned, but it can be done. It's a matter of investment. This is something that the government has to put in. And already I think there's some realization of this. So as I said, that when you drive on the super highway, you do see windmills, but far less than there should be over there.
Thank you. I think, Sanaullah, we have to manage the process since we are running out of the time. We can have better discussions maybe at some other point. We have to give chance to other question askers as well.
Okay.
The next one is Asif Khan. Asif, could you please put your question to Professor Hoodbhoy?
Yeah, thank you. This is Asif, water and climate change expert, and working as the lead author for IPCC upcoming report as well. My question is all about, as we are talking about the sustainable development and water resources, energy resources, etc. So planting trees is really good initiative, but what about like extension of eucalyptus, which is really bad for groundwater kind of exploitation. So I believe like such initiatives should also be there. What's your stance about it? And second bit was all about the solar system. If we are going to have more solar system, there were a lot of articles about the end salvage of solar panels. How we will deal with those kind of salvage product at the end of 10 or 20 years. So do we have any real plans at different countries or developed countries as well? So this is my question. Thank you.
When you said eucalyptus, my blood pressure went up because I hate that tree. It sucks up so much water. People like it because it grows very fast, but it is so bad for the water table that I really think it should be banned from those places where water is scarce. On the issue of solar, look, the amount of solar energy that Pakistan receives, even if you take the total land area and you take 100th of that area, that's enough for all the energy requirements of Pakistan. Of course, there's the issue of storage, because there's no sun at night, obviously. And so what do you do with that? Batteries, well, maybe at some point in the future, Tesla is developing batteries like that. But there are other ways by which energy can be stored, and that is by heating salt. And then the heat gets stored in that molten salt, and it can be used at a later time. But solar technologies now are so advanced that solar plus wind counts for something like between 40 to 45% of all the energy that Germany currently produces. So you see, it's not just a toy anymore. Solar is for real.
Thank you. But the last question, there are lots of many as well, which are appearing in the chat, which I am receiving. Perhaps the time is beating us. The last one is going to be from Babar Ali. Babar, could you please ask the question? And unmute yourself first and then ask.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Thank you for your time and efforts. My question is that how we can pursue industries to use renewable energy, because they think like they don't want to spend much money on that kind of things. So how we can pursue them, and how government can give them subsidy over using renewable sources? Thank you.
Well, that's a good question. How do you persuade industries? Industries will look for the cheapest source of energy. And if it's coal, they'll use coal. If it's nuclear, they'll use nuclear. If it's solar, they'll use solar. So it depends upon the industry. Now, suppose there's an industry that requires steam for its boilers. Now, that steam can be produced by mirrors, which concentrate their heat at one point. And that is a process that is being used by countries around the world, including China. It is something that is becoming now industrially more readily available. So basically all you need is the investment in the mirrors, in the technology for steam generation and so forth. So it will be at some point cheaper than any other way. For industries, if you want to persuade them to use renewables, then you have to then make the cost of non-renewable energy higher than that of renewable energy. And this is the way that Germany has gone about things, and this is the way that Japan is now doing things. So it's a matter of doing the pricing, doing the economics right.
Thank you, Babar. Now I think we are moving towards the concluding remarks, or a bit from me as well. First, I would like to thank Professor Hoodbhoy for his efforts and making him available for this talk. So very much appreciated, sir. And we really enjoyed your inspired talk. And obviously there are number of lines of actions which need to be taken forward. Just, we don't want this forum to be simply a talking shop. That has been our intention, to move towards action rather than just having some discussions. One thing which worries me is that most of the questions that we have been put today were focused around energy side of things. We are really forgetting the water side here, which is really the life, and is my domain as well. So perhaps for our audience, a food of thought is that when we consume water, do appreciate its value. It's not for free. If you come to the West, people pay a lot through water services to the water utilities to get this water to that standard. On top of that, whatever water we have the considerable wastage in terms of leakages and so on and so forth. But this is a talk for some other day. The next talk that we will, but before I announce the next talk, can I ask all of you to please thank Prof Hoodbhoy for all his efforts in our usual way. If you can do a clap, some of us will listen and some of them will feel as well.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next talk is now on 30th of August. In Pakistan, it will be around 6 p.m. in the evening. And then the talk is coming from Professor Amos Winter from MIT. He is by training a mechanical engineer. He is going to talk about the technological developments and how to adapt technologies within the context of the developing countries. So we look forward to that talk, and today's talk will be made available from our university website. The recording will be available if some of you have missed it, or something, they can join over there. Thank you again for your time, and we really appreciate you coming in, and then we close the meeting now.